is somehow a bit complex, and currently we are privileged to have all institutions in place actually to deal with that technicality. So in all the frameworks, if you see, there are frequently mentioned challenges. One of the challenges actually, fast track registration, for instance, is about ease of doing business. Like we addressed this in terms of, for instance, in the presentation, having a digital platform, in-between platform, which actually manages all the process, all the labeling and the follow-up process. The second one, lack of differentiated financing mechanisms, lack of differentiated taxation for new businesses, lack of access to business workspace, lack of business knowledge. All this actually have been mentioned in all documents and other sessions held along the way. Lack of access to finance across all stages of growth was also a critical challenge that were actually being repeatedly mentioned. So reluctance to invest in innovations is also another important piece, because this is the fundamental thing that we need to consider while we talk about startups. Startups is innovative by nature, so lack of early stage funding, lack of formal lending, all these were challenges. I'm not trying to mention here, in fact, what the challenges are, but I just want to give you a highlight why we came up to this conclusion. Consequence of funding squeezes also, its challenge were mentioned. From conception through early stage VC startup in Ethiopia face major challenge in raising fund, and many promising ideas die on the vine as soon as the capital requirement exceeds the founder, family, and friends are willing to be able to risk. So these are the challenges. In fact, all this actually led to us the main components of the startup proclamation, which actually talks about governance and regulatory issues, which were actually addressed. Incentives and privileges is also another important piece. Fund of fund, grant, and national guarantee scheme, which are the three important funding schemes already addressed. Designation provision system is also another piece that is actually put into the proclamation. So saying this, how the proclamation resolved the issues of fund and investment, for instance, that I mentioned. One is the startup fund of fund is actually established as a share company by investment holding. This is one mechanism. It talks about mainly on the growth and later stages of investment. Still, the investment curve for growth stage is high, but it still considers the seed funding of early stage as well. But the involvement is a bit lower. When you talk about national guarantee scheme, it's more of the NEB's role, National Bank of Ethiopia role, I think. This also requires the credit guarantee scheme. The third one is grant program. This is a grant program which actually talks about a grant fund actually allocated by the government. These three blended together actually when they are implemented, and they have to actually well harmonized. They have to be well harmonized through actually their effectiveness. So one notice that one point that I want to mention is actually there are almost no public or private grant available just for general purpose of starting a business. This is not the norm when you talk about innovation. So starting a business is not the main issue, but the most important element of granting scheme is actually technology enablement and research. So startups doing research, startups that are tech-enabled, startup that requires investigation and innovation are actually the recipient of this grant. It's actually based on competition. So it's like the lesser form of grant for research. So this is how we're trying to approach, but this actually will give us some sort of solutions for the confusions along the way among different actors. This is all I have. I think the next session actually should consider, while discussing the issues on these three consolidated schemes regarding the investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Ato Salam Hunadifra, CEO of Innovation Development at the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. Thank you so much for that presentation, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go straight into a panel discussion of about 45 minutes on the Draft Startup Development Proclamation with Samia Abdul Qadir, President of the Ethiopian Youth Association, Youth Entrepreneurs Association. Please welcome Samia to the stage with a round of applause. I think this is a very good day for the Ethiopian Youth Entrepreneurs Association because they've been really pushing towards this proclamation and they've contributed a lot through their Zelila platform. If you could please. Thank you so much. And then we will be also joined by Brooke Yosef, Country Director of Allen and Jill Gray Philanthropies, as well as President of the Ethiopian Association of Startup Ecosystem. Please welcome Brooke as well. Brooke is also someone who's been into this sector for many, many years, contributing a lot and still doing it. Thank you, Brooke. We will also be joined by Oswald Osaretin Guabadia, a UNDP consultant who is going to join us virtually. And finally, this session is going to be moderated by Henok Laga, Director of Business Growth Services at Inkomoko. Please welcome the moderator, Ato Henok, as well, please, with a round of applause. And in the interest of time, I will allow Henok to introduce what Inkomoko is and who he is briefly, and then lead us into the conversation.
እንዴት አደራችሁ? ሰላም ነው? ኤክሳይትድ የሆነ አይመስልም ባይዞ ኢትዮጵያ የስታርታፕ ፕሮክላሜሽን ሊኖራት ነው። ኤክሳይትድ አይደላችሁም እንዴ? ጭብጨባ ያስፈልገው? በተጨማሪም ደግሞ የግሎባል አንተርፕረነርሺፕ ሳምንት ነው። ይሄ ሳምንት ሁላችሁንም እንኳን አደረሳችሁ ማለት ፈልጋለሁ። በተለይ አንተርፕረነሮች፣ ፋውንደሮች፣ ሊደሮች ታዬ እንግዲህ እንዳለው ከዚህ በፊት የአንተርፕረነርሺፕ ልማት ኢንስቲትዩት ነበር የምሰራው። አሁን ደግሞ ትንሽ መልኬን ቀይሬ ኢንኮሞኮ የሚባል ኢንተርናሽናል ተቋም ውስጥ ነው የምሰራው። ሜን ዓላማው የፓነል ዲስከሽኑ ኢትስ ሞር ኦፍ ኮንሰልቴሽን በተለይ ኪ ኢንዱስትሪ ፕሌየሮች በድራፍት የስታርታፕ ፕሮክላሜሽን እና የኢኮሲስተም ቢልደርስ ፕሮክላሜሽን ላይ ያላቸው አስተያየት፣ ያላቸው እይታ፣ ኮሜንትስ፣ ጥያቄዎች ምን ይመስላሉ የሚለውን ነው በጥቂቱም እንዳስሰው ማለት ነው። አይ ቲንክ we are ready join አድርጓል. Can we move this thing a bit? Yeah. ይሰማ? ኦኬ። ጥያቄያችንን እንግዲህ ወደ መጠየቅ እገባለሁ። እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ ፓነሊስቶቼ። ሚክስ አድርገው ተብያለሁ ቋንቋ እንግዲህ 70 30 60 40 ተብያለሁ። እንግዲህ እሞክራለሁ ለማድረግ። ከሳሚያ ሜቢ ጀምራለሁ ጥያቄውን። ሳሚያ አዲስም አብረን አንድ ቴብል ላይ መሆናችን ደስ ይላል። ታስታውሺ እንደሆነ ሁለት ዓመት በፊት የግሎባል አንተርፕረነርሺፕ ሳምንት ላይ ስታርታፕ ፕሮክላሜሽኑ በቃ በኦልሞስት በወር የቀረ አይወጣም ወይ ስንል ነበረ፣ ስትይ ነበረ። አዲስም ኮምፕሌንስ ያደርግ ነበረ። አሁን ደግሞ ሉክስ ላይክ ዋዜማው ላይ እንገኛለን። እንደ የስታርታፕ የወጣቶች የስታርታፕ ፋውንደሮችን አድቮኬት እንደሚያደርግ ተቋም ምን አየሽበት? ምን ሜቢ ክፍተቶች ፍሎዎች አየሽበት ከስታርታፕ ፕሮክላሜሽኑ ላይ? ሜቢ እሱ ላይ የተወሰነ ሀሳብ ካለሽ።
Thank you so much. His Excellency Dr. Belete Molla, Minister for Innovation and Technology, His Excellency Dr. Brooke, እንዲሁም ሁላችሁም እዚህ ያላችሁ ያንግ አንተርፕረነሮች ኢኮሲስተም ቢልደሮች እንዲሁም ደግሞ አጠቃላይ ጥሪውን አክብራችሁ የመጣችሁ እንግዶች ሁሉ እንዲሁም የሁላችንም አድቮኬተር አዲስ አለማየሁ I have to mention you so ሁላችሁም ስለተገኛችሁ እጅግ በጣም ደስ ብሎናል እስኪ የወጣት አርጉት በደንብ ማመስገን አለብን እኔ በጣም ደስ ብሎኛል ዛሬ ይሄን ጥያቄ ባጠይቀኝ ደስ ይለኝ ነበር ምክንያቱም ታስታውስ ከሆነ JCC Welcome His Excellency Dr. Eyob Mammo, State Minister for the Ministry of Finance. We are happy to have you here. So since our association established almost 4 years, the first agenda we mentioned about this proclamation. So since JCC found like before 5 years, yeah, since that time, this startup proclamation was drafted and a lot of consultation workshop. I was a part of it, so it's almost 9 or 10 drafts. So for me, I was a part of the process, so I can't say much. I only try to say is, please amend this proclamation and we can work on it. Then we can do a lot of consultation and inputs forward, then we can review. But I have only 3 critical points that I want to mention. The first thing is inclusivity, because Ethiopia is not only Addis, even we have a lot of young entrepreneurs across, so I'm afraid the proclamation is mentioning mostly about technology, AI, so most of the regions, they don't have incentive like the infrastructure, device, connectivity, so we need to consider and we need to have some incentives for the entrepreneurs who are working in the regions. So we need to mention some incentive like how we can treat the entrepreneurs that are working in different regions of Ethiopia. The other thing is the ministerial committee or the one that will form after this proclamation is amended. So please make sure this committee is inclusive because not only from the government and some individuals from different organizations, but please try to make some unicorn startups or startups that already have a unique value on this ecosystem. So the ministerial committee has to be more inclusive. So yeah, it's under process, but as a tip. The other thing is the alignment of the previous engagements or the previous activities and initiatives that the Ministry of Innovation did a lot of things, Ministry of Finance, even the UNDP. You invested a lot of things, so please don't drop out these activities, initiatives. For example, I can mention the portal, Mr. Salamion, if you remember, the iStar portal, you know, UNDP invested a lot, so we need to pick a lot of experience, initiatives, individuals, and everyone, you know, not only the initiatives and projects and programs, but it has to consider the previous engagements and the previous activities that this ecosystem invested for the past 5 years. Because የኛ ሀገር ነገር አዲስ ነገር ሲመጣ የድሮ ነገሮቹ እንጠላቸዋለን ብዙ ጊዜና we need to እስካሁን የተሰሩትን for example Mr. Brook he is one of our resource because association ሳይመሰረት በፊት በኔ company he was our mentor so ብዙ እንደሱ አይነት ደግሞ እንደ አዲስዬ በጣም ብዙ ቫልዩ ያበረከቱ ኢንዲቪጁዋሎች አሉ ፕላስ ኦርጋናይዜሽኖች አሉ ከሚን ተጨምሮ ሁሉም እንዲሁም ደግሞ ቀደም የገለጽኩት አይስታር gov.it የተባለ ትልቅ ፖርታል ሚንት በዩኤንዲፒ ሰርቶ ነበር። ሌላ ደግሞ አለ የሞልስ ሎንች ያደረገው I think it's from Mastercard Foundation. So እንደዚህ አይነት ኢንቨስት ያደረግናቸው ከዚህ በፊት የሰራናቸው ነገሮች ሁሉ መሬት ስናወርድ እነዚህን ይዘን ምናመጣበት ነገር ቢኖር ምክንያቱም ሊቆይብን ይችላል ይሄን ነገር እንደ አዲስ እንስራ ብንል at the end of the day ደግሞ this is the resource from our country እና እነዚህን ኮንሲደር ቢያደርግ I can't see much because ከድራፍቱ ጀምሮ ፕሮሰስ ውስጥ እና ኢንፑት ውስጥ ስለነበርኩኝ ይጽደቅ ብቻ ነው የምለው
Thank you so much Sami. I think the key takeaways I would say are inclusion and making sure previous efforts are taken into account going forward. Maybe let me proceed to Brooke. By the way, I was just instructed to make it in English, so that's why we have transformed. Brooke, maybe as a person heavily involved in the ecosystem, I would say for the past over a decade. And now as a president for the Ethiopian Association of Ecosystem Builders, what are some of the flaws and the opportunities that you have observed on the proclamation? What does it bring to stakeholders, ecosystem players such as EASE and the private sector in general?
Great, thank you very much, Henok. Good morning to you all. It's really a pleasure to represent the ecosystem and actually share and forward high-level pointers and suggestions that we have on the proclamation. Of course, this would not be the last of it. This probably would be the first, because as an ecosystem association, we are also in the process of actually organizing a formal session among our stakeholders to host a session on deliberating on the articles and the content, and then provide actually the feedback to the responsible organ formally. But with that said, so far the high-level feedbacks that we have gotten, the first thing that we did was just asked startups and other stakeholder players to share the concerns that they have, if there are any feedback that they have, and pleasantly all the issues that they raised, when we went back and referred the proclamation, pretty much most of them have already been addressed, which is an excellent thing, and I think that deserves a round of applause. But still, we would say that the first thing is to really see the whole context and purpose of the proclamation, right? So that's where we begin. As also someone who studied law, that's what I've been taught, right? So look at the objective of the proclamation, the underlying essence of it, what is the purpose that it's looking to serve, and based off of that, I would say then we would go into the definition, okay? The purpose of the proclamation is to enable and to create more enabling environment to startups. And as an ecosystem association, we believe with or without this proclamation, startups will continue coming. The problem would be it would take more time and effort for them to come into fruition and to changing and elevating all our livelihoods and quality of lives. But we want to expedite this process. We want to alleviate the hurdles. So what are the enabling things that are included there, and what could be still improved is what we saw with this perspective. And we saw the definitions. That's where we began. And some of the pointers, high-level pointers from the definitions, for example, would be, I would start with the good things. It has defined a person, judicial and physical, which is an excellent thing, because startups are driven by individuals, right? So this is exceptionally a commendable thing that the proclamation has. And with that definition, we would have loved to see a bit more substance on defining founders and co-founders. because the startup, the idea, there would be pivoting. There would be changing of the concept itself sometimes. So how do we really define co-founders, who would be an employee, who would be a co-founder and a founder, and what would be the benefit that they would have, and what would be the distinction between the founder and the startup itself, because the startup is not yet fully formed. It's an experiment. It might not work even. So how do we handle that is one of the things that we mentioned. This would come a bit more magnified when we see the article that covers actually employees of startup, which talks about particularly, and also investors of startup, which is a really amazing thing, again, in the proclamation that covers for international investors, right? So they are no longer, international investors are no longer subject to the minimum required capital, which is, if you have an Ethiopian co-founder, 150,000, or if you are coming fully as a foreign investor, 200,000, that's dollars startup capital, that's no longer applicable. Of course, subsequent suggestions would come, but that has been at least addressed already. This is great, but how about having an international co-founder, right? So when there would be a joint partnership between an Ethiopian founder and an international co-founder, how would they be treated? And without being an employee, how would we handle that co-founder relationship? This is particularly important because we are working with young people. We are looking into young people, and we are also operating in the era of African free trade zone and application. So if a Kenyan comes to Ethiopia with skills, again, really great thing in the proclamation, skill is also addressed and acknowledged as a contribution. And then an Ethiopian, also a young man or women partnered, how would they be treated? That would really give great depth to the proclamation. This is one. Another one is the concept of, again, going back into the definition, right? So we have been talking about innovation, and when we see the concept of innovation, how about kind of adding a little more detail? Maybe the details would come in regulations and other things, innovation of business models. Because as a country in Ethiopia, not necessarily new products or services could be startups. It's a little bit of change of model of business and approach could also serve and go long way. We can consider some of the most successful startups that we can imagine in our heads in our country, and if we really look into what they have been innovative on, it would be the business model, not necessarily the product or the service. So how do we cover that? I know it's a tricky thing because everybody would come and say, this is an innovative business model, but that's also why we have the committee to really see and understand and actually finally designate that startup as innovative and then also being startup or not. So these are the things that we saw at a very high level, but generally speaking, how also in terms of amendment, agility, definition, room for definition and other things, how open is the proclamation, how open would the committee would be is also another thing. This is, of course, something to discuss later on as we roll it out, because the nature of startups, to begin with, we don't know really, right? That's what it is. It's an experiment, and it needs a lot of flexibility and agility. How is the proclamation itself, the committee and the standards that the committee would set by themselves, being powered by this proclamation to be flexible and agile and have broader definition, broader scope than a limiting scope is the thought and the reflection that we are having at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brooke. I think it's a very good news to hear most of the ambiguities are cleared. Maybe my next two questions would be to Mr. Oswald. Mr. Oswald, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Good to have you with us today. As an expert, maybe also involved with crafting the final draft of the proclamation, I'm sure you might also have an opportunity to look at maybe proclamations of other countries. Where do you see our draft proclamation? Are we in good shape? Where does it stand, maybe based on your perspective?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be here, and also an honor to have been given the opportunity to review the Ethiopia proclamation, startup proclamation. So I think one of the key things, as been said today a few times, is that a startup. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So a startup proclamation is intended to solve problems in the ecosystem, and is really designed to look at the what aspects of the economy, what aspects of the environment need enabling to allow young people create fantastic ideas. I like the phrase that was used in the previous presentation that said "Eureka to unicorn." That just captures it, sort of the journey excellently. So startup acts are very specific to that country. I tend to say that we need a startup act for the continent, being that Africa is the future and we have a very young population. Those numbers are used all the time, so I don't really need to repeat it here. But we know what the opportunities are. And it's important that the entire continent takes a look at how we can do and harmonize startup policy that is going to position us in the rightful position for the digital economy. But I also think it's important that the individual states, so Ethiopia, Nigeria, Kenya, all look at what is unique about the environment, what is unique about the way the solutions, because every state in Africa, when you do this travel, you see that there's certain areas. For instance, if you look at the Timbuktu project initiative, they put manufacturing tech in Ethiopia, which speaks to what they believe can happen there from the local environment, and also from the other parts of Africa that will come there to also do ManuTech. So it's important to understand that every part of Africa is indeed unique. But we must look at what are the issues to our individual startup ecosystem and see how we solve it with legislation. And that's what this document has done. On reviewing the document, it was an excellent read. I was really excited to see some of the provisions that were in the document. Some of them reminded me of some of the things we either thought about in Nigeria or did in Nigeria. But I loved how there was a focus on the critical aspects of the ecosystem, one being the actual entrepreneurs themselves, and the other being, there's just a sort of a divide in the document, the other one being the ESOs, which are the people who actually support the startups. And when you're talking about an enabling environment, you must look at the ecosystem in a much more collaborative ecosystems. Is that the entrepreneurs think that they're in it alone. The entrepreneurs tend to think that they are the entirety of the ecosystem. I haven't been a founder myself in Nigeria. Prior to my public sector experience, if you had asked me who was the ecosystem, I would gladly and singularly say it is I and it is us, the entrepreneurs. Now understanding the participation and the required participation of the public sector in the conversation, and also other entities like ESOs, ecosystem support organizations, and investors and academia that offer, critical aspects to help create that enabling environment. So I think in that collaborative nature, once we start understanding the role everybody has to play, then we're able to build a healthy ecosystem that can now start generating and churning out unicorns or gazelles, as some people like to say, on the way to becoming elephants, trying to make this more African. It's important that we understand the role everybody has to play. So the document does a very good job of creating that sense of the startups will get support, but also the platform. So we also get a certain level of support. The investors get shows a clear in
I think it's connection. Maybe to save time, let me proceed maybe with my
this is the starting
second
point.
question to Brooke and Samia. Maybe it's a similar question with in a kind of different format. Maybe a quick correction. Mr. Oswald was not responsible to draft the final proclamation. My apologies. He was the reviewer and he provided his comments. Entirely, the proclamation was developed by Ethiopians and Ethiopian institutions. So the second question for both representing UNOEs and the Ethiopian Youth Entrepreneurs Association. So this proclamation, it's at a draft stage, almost about to be, ratified. So there has to be a sense of an ownership, among both government as well as institutions like yours. So what kind of roles could institutions or associations like yours could play to advocate the proclamation and to make sure, it's in place to be streamlined, across the nation?
Thank you so much. I think ስለ ኢዋይ የበለጠ ማውራት ጊዜ መፍጀት ነው የሚሆነው እንጂ ሁላችሁም you are EYA family and ዘለላ family. For the past 2-3 years 11 ዘለላ ኤፒሶዶችን አዘጋጅተን ሁላችሁም a part of it ነው ያላችሁት. But the new thing that EYA come to on board is congratulations for our strategy. Give us appreciation. Yeah, because EYA is now a big institution, so it's very difficult that, having an institution and building a system, not only for the youth-led initiative, but also even in the government system. So EYA, starting from knocking the door and sharing the vision, and also creating the awareness for the concerned bodies and stakeholders, and also lobbying and addressing some challenges for the stakeholders. We have some pilot programs and projects with EDI and MasterCard Foundation and also UNDP and some other stakeholders. So we are not only advocator and we are not only bridging the missing link, but also we practically experience what really the young entrepreneurs face in this ecosystem. Even me as a president, I'm also a young entrepreneur. So most of our board members, they own their own company. So we know, there is no new things when it comes to our ecosystem about the challenge and the solution that we need to address as Ethiopian Young Entrepreneurs Association. So as we strongly advocating the ecosystem for the past 3 years, with the Zalala platform, and also we have Kana platform now that is bridging the missing link. So we are working with the access to finance, training and mentorship, market exposure, because we have an office in China, and also we are founding new office in UAE for access to market, because at the end of the day, the idea has to be sale and the idea has to be marketable, and it has to generate more economic income for our country and for the startup by itself. So now EYA with the 3-year strategy plan, I'm glad, Henok, you are a part of it. So this strategy aims to address the critical challenge that young entrepreneurs has, and also this strategy also mention that as a 1-year implementation plan, that to strongly advocate and amend this proclamation and to be a part of the implementation process by actively working on with the stakeholders like Mint and other stakeholders that are going to work with this. So we are also believing that as a national startup portal, we will work we will play a lot of role on the database and pipeline development, even accessing a lot of information, data, and also linking a lot of initiatives and activities that we have, because now anyone can be a member with Telabor Super App. We launch our membership registration on Telabor, so anyone can be EYE member with the level, and on that super app, they can, it can generate the membership ID, so anyone from anywhere can be EYE member. So we make our platform more addressable, and also it will be easier for us to have an input and also to have accountable and transparent system for our young entrepreneurs as a big bridge for the young entrepreneurs with the concerned bodies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sami. Brooke?
Thank you very much. I think it's pretty much straightforward, right? So as an ecosystem association, our role and our mandate as well is to support the government and the proclamation, starting from awareness creation, right? So and also from collecting feedback. This is where it starts. Really seriously looking at the proclamation, the draft, being not only participatory but meaningfully participating. That's where we start our contribution. Really taking into serious consideration of each and every single article there and its connotation, not necessarily now, not necessarily from our personal and organizational interests only, but from looking at it from the longer objective of the country, and also the ultimate objective of the drafting of the proclamation. So that is where we will start. And then once it is out, then creating awareness, right? So the ecosystem players, everybody needs to come on board, starting from understanding the definition. What's a startup, right? That has been, I would say, one of the key successes even recently. Defining what a startup is by itself has been a tremendous achievement. So communicating that across ecosystem players and taking the lead on building capacity of the ecosystem players themselves, that would be our contribution. And also after that, you know, as I have mentioned it earlier, the dynamics of innovation and also the dynamics of the startup ecosystem, technology, world trends, they change and they evolve. So how do we become a channel to the relevant government bodies and to all the ecosystem players by collecting data, observing what's going on the ground, how it is being rolled out on the ground, and actually collecting data and analyzing that and providing feedback and channeling it to further decision making is also something that our contribution would include. And of course, this would also include in general mapping the ecosystem itself. Right, so how do we, beyond, you know, there is this thing that I'd like to take my hat as ecosystem president now and speak as Brooke, and there is always the thing that I say from Atlas to Brass, right? So when we talk about startup ecosystem, we are extremely concentrated. All the players are in that corridor. So how do we take it beyond? You know, in the ecosystem, neighboring countries, there are associations, multiple associations that are formed based on geography, you know, out of the capital city, based on sectors and others. So how do we enable this? How do we really cultivate this inclusivity across the startup ecosystem is also something that, now that we have the proclamation, this would be the support and the role that the ecosystem association should play and would play. And it goes on. And the last point would be institutional learning, right? So it comes along with data collection and gathering. How do we really maintain the lessons, the learnings And how do we support government and government bodies also to sustain these experiences and lessons, right? So God forbid, let's say Ministry of Innovation and Technology change it into another ministry. What's going to happen? Right? So what would happen? So how do we continue the lessons? How do we continue the great endeavors that have been started? That would be the role of the private sector. That would be the role of the ecosystem players. So we can only do this by moving hand in hand and having the bigger picture in mind. So this would be our contribution and going forward. Enoch.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Brook. Is Mr. Oswald on? Okay. I'm sure I'm audible, Mr. Oswald. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Our apologies for the inconvenience earlier. Maybe let me proceed to the final question if you can hear me. The proclamation is at its final draft stage and currently on public consultation. And what are some of the key considerations that maybe the government or ecosystem players and stakeholders should take into account? Or what are some of the things that you take as a risk when the government fully ratifies and implements this proclamation at full scale?
Thank you for that question. I mean, the key risk is ensuring that the beneficiaries remain engaged, right? What tends to happen sometimes with our citizens is they sort of leave the piloting, to government, but remain engaged and remain concerned about the well-being and the health of the proclamation, what process it's in, how can we help, how can we participate, is really critical to the assurances that the document gets implemented. The key risk is it not being implemented. Most people may not know that the Nigerian Startup Act, which is now 2 years old, is at a very low percentage of implementation. Albeit being energized to get started again to ensure that we implement the act, so that the benefits of the act, that's what's really critical. Drafting the act or proclamation is a very intricate process, but the implementation of the proclamation is where the real value is released into the ecosystem. So the prayer there is that that it is implemented and that it is done in a way where the interpretations of it, which is another risk that I discovered during these early stages of implementation, how it is interpreted and how that interpretation leads into the implementation is something that we also have to be careful about to ensure that we are able to manage that, to ensure that the best value is derived from the good intentions of the proclamation. So those are sort of the key things. And I also think maybe one other thing would be, how do we continue, and I think I heard the last speaker sort of hint at this, how do we continue to ensure that beneficiaries have a say, right? So sort of a institution of the voices of the beneficiaries, how do they continue to have a say in the process, and how can they continue to engage formally into the process of the proclamation? But outside of those, I believe that a fantastic job was done. Very impressed by what I read, and my reviews were provided, and they were considered, and we had a very good discussion, and I actually learned from the process, a lot of things that are happening in Ethiopia, and I'm very, very excited about the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oswald. I think the key risk, maybe to reflect, would be for the proclamation not to be implemented. That would be a devastation, actually. And maybe some of the points Brook and Samia raised are a matter of collaboration, ensuring the dynamism of the proclamation as time goes. Also inclusion, advocacy, as well as connecting the dots and activating regions in Ethiopia. I like the word that you used, Atlas to Brass. Yeah. So I think ensuring this would make the proclamation successful. I would like to thank all my panelists very much for your time, and Mr. Oswald as well. Maybe finally, before I conclude, I would like to really appreciate all individuals and institutions involved actually in drafting this proclamation. Maybe we can close with a round of applause and appreciation for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much once again to the panel and for our moderator as well for a very good conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just been joined by His Excellency Ato Melaku Wallabel, Minister of Industry, as well as His Excellency Dr. Eyob Takalli, State Minister of Finance. If you could please welcome them with a nice round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Dr. Eyob Takalli, State Minister of Finance, for his remarks. Please welcome him with a nice round of applause.
Good morning. What an exciting morning. As we sat there, reflecting, I was trying to understand what Atlas to Brussels, and Dr. Brook was telling me what it meant. That short journey from Atlas to Brussels, but look where we're heading now. Kudos to you, to all of you for that excellent journey. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really an honor, ladies and gentlemen, entrepreneurs, partners, and members of the startup community, for me to address you today as we embark on a transformative journey for Ethiopia's entrepreneurial ecosystem. When you look back at the last 6 years, Ethiopia has seen an influx of new startups emerging in the market. While this has been, on the one hand, a testament to the improving business environment, on the other hand, it showed what could have been done if there was a much better environment. That's why we approached the issue of startup with humility, recognizing that it's an opportunity to listen, to learn, and better understand the change and aspirations of this startup. As we saw your commitment through the years in contributing to the country's development, which really has inspired us, which encouraged us, the success stories achieved in such a short time really showed that a big potential is in stock. A huge thing is coming, and something big is waiting to unfold. And that is why Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has set up a ministerial task force to look at this issue. You recall, about a year or so ago, he tasked, some of us, he said, look, I want you to look at this startup ecosystem anew. What are the challenges? What is happening? We have this vision of making Ethiopia a startup ecosystem, but we need to understand what the challenges are. There was an ongoing conversation, as we heard from an excellent panel, a lot of advocacy work, but really inspiring, encouraging successes from our young entrepreneurs, which I think brought the agenda up front on the radar of the Ethiopian government, starting from the Prime Minister. And so what we've done over the last couple of years, really, as we've worked with you closely, is to confirm, to underscore the fact that this country has huge potential. Ethiopia can actually be a startup nation. I know on some of the issues you were frustrated, we were delayed a little bit, but I think finally the time has come. The time has come to embark on the next journey. The time has come to collectively work together and create a very strong ecosystem and really put Ethiopia on the map, on the digital global map, as it's already emerging as an incoming nation on the digital global map. Now, for me, this new policy direction, this conviction by the government is the manifestation of the commitment, the manifestation of the trust the government has put in you, in young entrepreneurs, to take this nation forward as we embark on a prosperity path. You know, we're saying there is a generational call. You know, the last couple of months, we've been reviewing the history of Ethiopia's economic development. And it's in a way painful. If you look at the last 6 decades, you see that a number of Ethiopians, fellow Ethiopians, the former generation, you know, they've tried, they've worked hard to grow, to prosper. But I think we are understanding as we study the history of Ethiopia's economic development that they have not fully succeeded despite all those efforts. What we are saying now is, how do we make a difference? How do we make sure this generation, you know, your generation, our generation, can take this nation forward, can create a success story out of Africa? You know, don't undermine this dream of becoming an African beacon of prosperity. You know, say in the next couple of decades, we should be an African beacon of prosperity, but our aspiration is even at global stage. You know, as you talk about you know, the Asian tigers or so, there is a conviction by the government that a success story can emerge from Africa, and it would be from East Africa, and it would be no other than our country, Ethiopia. So for me, I see this, you know, what we're doing here as part of that exercise. We have identified a critical sector, a digital sector, as one pillar of the economic growth, as a source of growth. And if, as we've started now, we put our hands together and create the right ecosystem, I think this sector can be an engine of growth, one important source of growth in and of itself, but also, I think, supporting other sectors, manufacturing, tourism, agriculture, to innovate, to adapt technology, to do better, to increase significant productivity. Now, what do we do next? The point I really like to make today is, while identifying the essential components of a thriving ecosystem is crucial, I think it's equally important to strategically connect these elements to create a functioning system that supports innovation and entrepreneurship. So gone are those days when the work is just from Atlas to Brass, when the work is about just few individuals, you know, in isolation talking about ecosystem. We need to connect those dots. So what is happening in you know, somewhere in a remote university where a young guy is thinking of a very creative idea, but lacks finance, lacks a little bit of support. And if we connect that, I think we can really succeed. With this in mind, we have dedicated a lot of effort. I think I really want to take this opportunity to thank the team that did this work, you know, the Ministerial Task Force. But in particular, I want to thank Dr. Brook and his team, a young, you know, vibrant lawyers, economists. I was cringing a little bit when somebody said this was drafted by, I know with all due respect to our panelist earlier, as he said, as corrected rightly, he reviewed it, but it was drafted by us. You know, we talked about Startup Act for a while, even getting the name wrong, but the team got it right, put together an amazing proclamation. think we have a masterpiece at hand, and I'm glad to hear the comment overall was that this is a very good work. Whatever needs to be enhanced, improved, we can improve. But are we going to implement it? Oh boy, is what somebody said at one point. You know, this government, right? Once we are convinced about one thing, we go all the way, to assure you. In fact, from earlier conversations, including the event we had with the Prime Minister, you've noticed that we've taken some concrete actions already. Tax incentives, for instance. We have the draft ready at hand. We want to create a tax incentive that is properly targeted and effective. So we've looked into these tax exemptions, tax holidays, as needed loss carry forward provisions, some incentive for startups. We've decided as a government to put our money where our mouth is, and that said, putting aside the required resource to create that fund. And unfortunately now, Dr. Brook, with all that conviction, has gone to EIH, so now he has no option but to put that fund together so that we can fund, invest, put our money where our mouth is, and create a very thriving startup ecosystem. So to conclude, I want to underline again that Ethiopia is uniquely positioned to become a thriving hub for startups. The democratic advantage is undeniable. The passion and the talent is abundant. The opportunities are vast, and the support ecosystem is steadily taking shape. Once we identify and address the missing piece, which we are doing now, I have no doubt that Ethiopia will emerge at the birthplace of many unicorns. Today's discussion in that sense are pivotal because the success of this policy depends on you, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the accelerators, the ecosystem builders, development partners, and policymakers, including the ministers joining today here. But your insight and feedback has been quite useful, but I urge you to continue to give feedback. This is the first and the final, in a way, consultation, but the first of a regulatory requirement, because at the Parliament there will be continuous discussion sessions. Please show up, make your voice heard, make sure that this proclamation is a start of a big thing coming in this nation. Thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you as we create a startup nation in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your message, for that enthusiastic message. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to announce that in case you have questions and suggestions on the startup proclamation as well as the draft policy, please send your comments and questions to the following email. It should be displayed any minute, but I will just read it through. It's ETH Startup Comment, ETH Startup Comment at outlook.com. Then we will incorporate your questions, suggestions in the draft. Without further ado, I think the video is ready, the Timbuktu video. We will get to the video, and then, yeah. So we're a bit stressed on time. The ministers have to run, so we're trying to finish as early as we can. So if the video is ready, Eternal, if you could please launch the video. It's a 3-minute Timbuktu video. Please enjoy it.
We believe in the power of ideas to solve big, difficult problems and to transform people and planet. Africa's tech startups are just getting started. Introducing Timbuktu, the largest initiative in the world to support the African innovation ecosystem, bringing together public and private partners and bridging catalytic and commercial capital. Timbuktu will invest $1 billion to address gaps in early stage risk capital, to get the ecosystem right, and to capture the Pan-African opportunity. In each hub, a startup builder will nurture investment-ready startups, while a commercial venture fund will invest in early-stage startups. Timbuktu is sparkling Africa's startup revolution. Timbuktu is forging the new African venture capital. Are you in?
Welcome to the Timbuktu Pan-African family. So it really warms my heart that
About that was a bit of a mistake. The video will come after a speaker we have in the house. So we're coming to the Timbuktu call for action announcement now, for which I'm going to kindly invite Ms. Charu Bist, Deputy Resident Representative of the UNDP. Please welcome her to the podium with a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Your Excellency, Mr. Melako Alebel, Minister of Industry, Your Excellency, Dr. Belete Mola, who's just had to leave us, Your Excellency, Dr. Ayob Tekalind, State Minister for the Ministry of Finance, Your Excellency, Dr. Bruktaye, CEO of EIH, and Your Excellency, Ms. Miriam Syed, Advisor at the Prime Minister's Office, ladies and gentlemen, innovators, and everyone else here, all protocols observed. UNDP is honored to be here today at this current time, supporting Ethiopia as the country develops a very robust policy and proclamation on startup development under the leadership of the State Startup Ministerial Committee. I am also excited to kick off the second part of our program, which is on the launch for the call of proposals. Many of you have read the launch of the Timbuktu Hub on your invitation cards and may have wondered what it meant and how it ties with the national consultation on the draft startup proclamation. The answer is very simple. Startups are at the heart of Timbuktu. And what is Timbuktu? Timbuktu is a pan-African initiative that will unleash the power of local startups. There are hubs already launched or being launched all across Africa. And let me take a few minutes to focus on what we are launching in Ethiopia, which is the ManuTech Hub. In February this year, most of you may have also been there, when our UNDP's Regional Director for Africa, Madam Ahuna, was in Addis, where in a discussion in the Adwa Museum, she was asked by a number of you why Ethiopia was not part of the group of African countries launching a Timbuktu Hub. As we do in UNDP, we always listen to your suggestions, and in April, Madam Ahuna came back to Addis to announce that Ethiopia will be added to the list of countries. She met with the Startup Ethiopia Ministerial Committee to discuss options for Ethiopia. The discussion led to the acknowledgement that the vast investment that Ethiopia has made in the manufacturing sector through the industrial zones and other initiatives placed it in a good place to host a hub on manufacturing technologies, hence the ManuTech. Simply put, ManuTech is inviting African startups using technology in all the various forms to explore solutions for the manufacturing sector. The call for application that we are announcing today will be open until the 25th of December 2024. Timbuktu is looking for startups who offer technology-based solutions that are scalable, unique approaches, innovative approaches, and those that are technically sound. The ManuTech Hub aims to officially welcome the first group of startups in February 2025, who will of course go through an intense boot camp and acceleration program. A smaller group will be further selected and receive a cash grant at the end of the 3-month acceleration program to work on their solutions further. We are hoping to host cohorts of 2 a year, and I'm sure that we will continue to refine and improve the process, engagement, and ultimately the impact of this new hub. I would like to warmly thank the Startup Ministerial Committee and the Ministry of Industry for their commitment, for their leadership in making the Timbuktu ManuTech Hub a reality in Addis Ababa. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to check out the application form, apply and widely share with your networks and create the momentum that is definitely needed. And now we will have the speech from our UNDP Regional Bureau Director for Africa, who would have loved to be here to launch it, but couldn't be here because she's already tasked in another meeting. So with that, I will hand over to the facilitator for the next part. Thank you.
Welcome to the Timbuktu Pan-African family. So it really warms my heart that Addis Ababa is officially on board. Addis is the place I called home for several years as the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator and as UNDP Resident Representative in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia today, as a country, remains close to my heart. And I am informed that you are currently having a public consultation on a draft startup proclamation for Ethiopia, an issue at the very heart of our Timbuktu initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and members of this wonderful Pan-African family, if you might be asking why Timbuktu, you might be familiar with the Ghanaian word sankofa, which means to go back and retrieve. That is what we're doing with Timbuktu. We are going back to the time in history when the city, Timbuktu, in Mali, was synonymous with knowledge, commerce, and prosperity beyond Africa's borders. It is the birthplace of the richest man that ever lived in history, a man called Mansa Musa. So, as we prepare Africa for a prosperous future, we say, from there to Africa's future. The Timbuktu hubs will help us move the narrative beyond the potential of Africa to finally delivering on the promise of a largely untapped and unnurtured talent of Africa's youth. In January this year, the UNDP administrator, Mr. Akim Steiner, launched Timbuktu on the sidelines of the Davos summit. He was accompanied by the presidents of Rwanda and Ghana. We had planned to launch 8 hubs as part of the Timbuktu ecosystem. But with Ethiopia and Zambia jumping on board, we are now planning 10 thematic hubs across the continent. They are now at various stages of readiness. Ladies and gentlemen, these thematic hubs, each focusing on one important development area, will force us to work across borders and invest as one Africa, leveraging the One Africa market, the Africa Continental Free Trade Arrangement. We will build a Pan-African ecosystem to catalyze innovation, investment, and partnerships, bringing together governments, the industry, academia, and our development partners. For far too long, we have been intimidated by the challenges facing Africa. We do not have a scarcity of talent in Africa. Our challenge has been mainly limited opportunities. Our success stories rarely receive the same spotlight and enthusiasm that our shortcomings seem to command globally. The narrative around Africa's youth bulge is quick to mask their ingenuity. Timbuktu promises to change this narrative. With the initiative, UNDP and the Timbuktu Foundation are committing to bring hope back through unleashing homegrown solutions that will power Africa's prosperity. Timbuktu is a declaration of war against poverty, joblessness, and dependency. So, dear participants, I wish to warmly thank the government of Ethiopia, particularly the Prime Minister's office and the Startup Ministerial Committee, for stepping up and ensuring that the political capital required to make Timbuktu a success is fully mobilized. Let me also thank the Ministry of Industry for providing this beautiful building to host the Manufacturing Tech Hub in Addis Ababa. You know, countries that volunteer to host Timbuktu are doing so with several commitments. This includes the commitment to develop an ambitious and regionally inclusive Startup Act with startup visas and work permits for all deserving African entrepreneurs, and of course financial investment in the Timbuktu Africa Fund. And I'm happy to note that Ethiopian startups have already started benefiting from the Timbuktu cohorts, having been selected from hundreds of applicants to participate in the FinTech Hub, which was launched in July in Lagos, and the Health Tech Hub just launched in Kigali last week. Ethiopia has chosen manufacturing tech, so it will be hosting startups from within the country and across Africa that are innovatively using technology and other means to find solutions that will help make our manufacturing sector cutting edge and globally competitive. The time is now. And with this, I am so excited to officially launch Ethiopia's ManuTech Hub, welcoming the first cohort of ManuTech African startups to Addis Ababa. Congratulations, Ethiopia.
Yes, thank you so much, Mrs. Ikoano, for that launch. And I picked that line that goes, Timbuktu is a declaration of war against what? Against poverty, ladies and gentlemen. So with this, we're going to go straight to the official launching, for which I'm going to kindly ask for the Ministerial Committee, Excellencies, to step on stage, as well as the UNDP Deputy Representative to come up with that tablet, and they are going to click the Timbuktu open from stage. And those of you joining us, yes, I think everyone has to be on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, in the very moment where they click it open, it will actually be officially open. So without further ado, we count 3, 2, and 1, and they kick it open. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. The Timbuktu call for application launch. Congratulations to everyone. As they take a group photo, I would like to invite a few more people to join them. If, I don't know, it could be, please remain on stage so we have a nice group photo before you step down. I don't know, the youth should be represented by Samia, I think the president of the Ethiopian Youth Entrepreneurs Association, and anyone else who must be in this picture as you think this is a great day for Ethiopian startups and for Timbuktu. Please join us quickly so we catch the ministers in this group photo. Don't let me decide who gets in this picture. If you feel this is your day, please quickly join us. I will give you 1 minute before, yes. Yes, excellent. If we are too many, some of us will have to be down here. On this side as well, please. Yes, please. Can we stand a bit closer to each other so you are all in the camera? Yes. Yes, this is what I meant by don't let me decide who gets in that picture. Thank you so much and congratulations. And then in a moment, we'll get to His Excellency's closing remarks. You should give us a smile. It's a great day for Ethiopia. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I'll give him a second.
Thank you so much. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Ato Melaku Alebel, Minister of Industry of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, for his closing remarks. Please welcome him with a nice round of applause.
I think it is time to say good afternoon. እንዴት ዋላችሁ? I was in ManuTech's exhibition this morning, and I have seen a lot of untapped resources in the mining sector. And we usually say Ethiopia is a land of origin. But most importantly, we better say also it is a land of opportunity and a land of untapped resource. And it needs innovation and technology to utilize this resource that we have for centuries. It's a matter of technology and innovation that brings change in the country. በጣም የሚደንቅ ሀብት ነው ያለው ያልተነካ ሀብት በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ኢትዮጵያን ተወዳዳሪ ማድረግ የሚችል ሀብት ነው ያለን። ይሄን ኢንፍራስትራክቸር እና የሚያሰራ ፖሊሲ እና ጠንካራ ፕራይቬት ሴክተር ኢኖቬቲቭ ቴክኖሎጂ የሚጠቀም ከጨመርንበት የድህነት እና የኋላ ቀርነት ጉዳይ ታሪክ ይሆናል ማለት ነውና ይሄ እንዲህ አይነት የማኑፋክቸሪንግ ቴክኖሎጂ ሀብ ትልቅ ብሬክ ስሩ የሚያመጣ ነው ማለት ነው። እነዚህ ቪሽየስ ሰርክል የሆነውን ድህነት ለመስበር ትልቅ አስተዋጽኦ ያበረክታል። ለዚህ የቲምቡክቱ ፕሮግራም መሳካት ትልቅ አስተዋጽኦ ያደረጉትን ዶክተር ሳሙኤል እና ማርያምን በዚህ አጋጣሚ በጣም ከፍ ባለ ሁኔታ ላመሰግን እወዳለሁ። Excellencies, Ministers, representative of UNDP, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address this distinguished gathering as we conclude the Startup Proclamation, public consultation, and officially launch the Timbuktu call for application. Today's discussion marks a critical milestone in Ethiopia's journey to transform its entrepreneurial and industrial landscape, positioning the country as a leader in innovation and manufacturing in Africa. Ethiopia, guided by its homegrown economic reform agenda and the 10-year development plan, has set an ambitious goal to become the manufacturing hub of the continent. This vision goes beyond industrial output. It is about fostering an ecosystem that supports startups, leveraging the potential of youth, and create sustainable economic opportunities. The Startup Proclamation, which we have reviewed and discussed today, represents a critical step toward establishing a legal and institutional framework that supports startups to thrive in Ethiopia. It creates a conducive environment for innovation, investment, and scalability, enabling entrepreneurs to lead our industrial transformation. The Ethiopia Tamert movement, the Made in Ethiopia movement, launched in 2022, further underscores our commitment to addressing key bottlenecks and enhancing the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. This aligns seamlessly with the establishment of the Timbuktu Manufacturing Technology Hub here in Addis Ababa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the ManuTech Hub is not just only a facility, it is a Pan-African initiative with transformative potential. It connects the African mind. This will be a center to connect the innovative Africans in Addis Ababa. It will serve as a Pan-African center of excellence, nurturing impactful manufacturing technologies and scaling innovative startups across Africa. For Ethiopian startups, the Timbuktu initiative presents remarkable opportunities. It helps bridges financing gaps, strengthens ecosystem linkage, and overcomes barriers to cross-border trades. More importantly, it opens doors to harnessing opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area, enabling startups to scale faster, capture Pan-African market potential. Today, we officially launch the call for applications for the first cohort of startups. This call invites young and visionary, innovative entrepreneurs across Africa, aged 18 to 35, who are ready to harness technology to transform the manufacturing industry sector. The selected startup will participate in the bootcamp and rigorous acceleration program set to begin in February 2025 alongside the African Union Head of States Summit, which makes a key milestone in this journey. This program will provide them with the tools, networks, and resources they need to succeed. The government of Ethiopia remains steadfast in its commitment to fostering an enabling environment for startups. Through the Startup Proclamation and Partnership, which global stakeholders like the United Nations Development Programme, Ethiopia is laying the groundwork for a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem. Our collaboration on the ManuTech reflects Ethiopia's dedication to fostering innovation that drives inclusive growth, creates jobs, and builds a sustainable future for the continent. As we conclude, let us recognize the significance of this moment. The Startup Proclamation, the ManuTech Hub, and the Timbuktu initiative are not just projects, they are pillars of a new vision for Africa, which represent a new dawn for Africa's manufacturing and innovation ecosystem, a future fueled by youth-driven innovative entrepreneurship, inclusivity, and resilience. Together, we can transform challenges into opportunities and ensure that Africa takes its rightful place in the global economy as a hub of knowledge, innovation, and growth. Thank you for your commitment, your collaboration, and your shared vision. Let's take this moment forward to build the Africa we dream of, an Africa where entrepreneurship thrives, industries flourish, and innovation knows no bounds. Together, we can turn this vision into reality. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Ato Malaku Lebel, the Minister of Industry, for honoring us with your closing remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to once again remind you of the email link, ETH Startup comment at Outlook, for your comments and suggestions. So we couldn't get into the discussion because we're pressed for time. We really apologize about that. And finally, the Entrepreneurship Development Institute, EDI, is excited to invite any one of you who can stay for lunch. And this afternoon, they have the GEW 2024 conference hosted in partnership with the UNDP happening here at 2:30, from 2:30 to 5:30. So if you could afford the time, please stay, remain behind, and join them. Without further ado, thank you all so much. And please, let's give a round of applause to our guests and let them leave with honor, please. Thank you all so much. And it's been an honor serving you, and my role here is done. And lunch will be ready in about 15